All right. So, as Justin was saying, and thank you, Justin, for having me here tonight. They decided to accept a talk that I pitched for abstractions. I was like, how about we try out the talk on a smaller audience first before abstractions? And so Justin was kind enough to schedule this through Code and Supply. So this is about take what you want compensation. Who here has ever set their own salary? You have.
I mean, I've had a fair amount of control over it. Not the same way you're going to talk about that.
Okay. I mean, what I want the answer to be is no, are you crazy? Because this is like a pretty new idea, and I want 5 years from now for the answer to be yes, of course, this is normal. I think this is a really exciting practice. It's one that so the purpose of the talk tonight is to talk about this experiment that we did with Take What You Want compensation at this company that I'm involved with. I founded called GratiPay. We didn't invent Take What You Want salaries. They've been around since the 80s. Anyone familiar with a book called Maverick by Ricardo Semler? Okay, it's a management book published in 1989 originally. Yeah, so Semco is a Brazilian manufacturing company. I think actually now they've broadened, but historically they were a Brazilian manufacturing company. And when the company was passed from father to son in the late 70s, the son took over and was like, all this boring, like traditional company stuff, I'm done with it, out the window, and started instituting these sweeping democratic changes to his company. And then ended up writing a book about it, and Harvard Business Reviews all over it and everything like that. But it's from the 80s, so it's kind of this classic by now. It's this example that everybody looks to for kind of very forward-thinking business practices. So that's actually where we got the idea for what we call Take What You Want compensation. In a lot of the literature that's out there, it's called self-set salaries. That's what he introduced, self-set salaries. There's another company called Morningstar, which is a tomato processor of all things out in California. It's like got, some double-digit percentage of the United States tomato production, and they practice the same thing, self-set salaries, and they've been doing it since the 80s as well. So it's not a brand new idea. It's not one that we invented. So GratiPay is one of a handful of startups and consultancies and whatnot that are kind of rediscovering this practice and kind of making it our own and revitalizing it and trying to spread the word about how great it is. Right. So the reason it's so great is that I'm a Lego. Anybody seen the Lego movie? Remember the Lego movie? Nobody? Come on, somebody's seen it. You have kids. Somebody has kids. Okay. Or you just like Lego movies. So the Lego, but do you know the song, Everything is Awesome? Everything is awesome, right? Everything is cool when you're part of a team. Okay? Work. I love work, all right? I love physical work. I actually worked for a landscaper last season, like 1 day a week, just like out in the sun sweating for 9 hours. I had the best tan of my life. It was fantastic. Like physical work I love, obviously programming, Code and Supply, the tech meetup I love intellectual work, I love emotional work, I love work. So I'm a Lego because Legos like to work and build things. And fortunately for me, there's an infinite amount of work in the world. We were just talking about this earlier. Our friend here came back, and I'm sorry to get your name. Randy. Chad. Hi. You come back from vacation, and you had 500 some emails in your inbox, right? Each one of those representing, some amount of work to be done, right? And all of us have the same, right? We have an inbox that's full, and we've got, task lists and to-do lists that are full. There's an infinite amount of work in the world. I think when I looked it up, GitHub has 12 million open issues right now. And each time you refresh the page, it changes because it's constantly churning. There's an infinite amount of work to be done. So that's good news for me because I'm a Lego and I love to do work. not only do I love to do work, I love to do work with other people. I love to share work. When I do something and I get it done, I want to share it with other people. I want to say, hey, come look how cool this thing is that I built, right? And I want to see what other people are building and working on, right? That's why we come to things like Build Night and other events like Code and Supply is doing, to find out all these cool things that we're building together. And to work on them together, to actually hack on stuff together and build stuff together. So I love work, and there's an infinite amount of it, and I love working with other people in communities of work. Another thing I love is money. I love money because money gives me a way to thank other people for their work. Because I can't do it all myself. So not only am I sharing, in communities of work with people building stuff and checking out all the cool stuff other people are doing, but I'm depending on the work of others, right? Somebody built this chair. I have no idea who it was. Somebody designed it, right? And all that, this is really complicated. It wasn't just sitting here from the dawn of time. So somebody built this, and money is actually a really cool system for thanking whoever it was that built this chair. It's a really efficient system for thanking people for doing work. Imagine how hard it would be for me to write a thank you note to everybody whose stuff I used all the time. So I love money because it gives me a way to say thank you to people who do work that I value and appreciate and depend on. And so these two streams. So I love work and I love money. I love work. I love there's an infinite amount of work, and I love doing work with other people, and that's why I love open source. Okay, that's why I love the tech community and the open source community is because we've figured out that we can do this. Here's this whole community of people who are like, awesome, let's work on stuff together, and do it in this global collaborative way. And there's this whole 12 million issues on GitHub and everything else besides, right? So I love the open source community. For that reason, I love being a part of it because it's this global community of work, essentially. And I love money as a way to thank people for doing work that I value and appreciate. And so what I really want is to figure out how to bring money together with open source, and that's the work that I'm doing in GradaPay together with everyone else working in GradaPay. But here's the problem. When we get to the point where an open source project receives money for the work that they've done. Somebody values their work, they want to say thank you, they say, I'm a company, I used your software, here's $1,000 for the software that you wrote that we depend on. PHK, are you guys, are you folks familiar with PHK? He's a FreeBSD hacker, wrote a lot of important tools in FreeBSD. Now he wrote a tool called Varnish, which is an HTTP cache. So Varnish sits in front of your web application server and makes it go really fast, basically, right? And lots of big sites use it. So PHK came up with this really interesting idea in 2009 and building on work he'd done previously for how to fund his work. He came up with something called the Varnish Moral License, okay? And if you've spent any time in open source software, you're familiar with licensing as a way to say, here's the permission that I give you to use the code that I've written. The Varnish Moral License says, is actually about giving people permission to give you money as part of their engineering budget instead of their marketing budget. So he's like, basically, here's a piece of paper. You could say, we use the software, and I'll write you an invoice based on this, but you don't have to pay. It's basically a self-billing system. So he invented this, or ended up with this system in 2009. And then what he does, so you can go on his website and you can look. You can say Facebook paid him this much money this month because for this Varnish Moral License. They didn't have to, but they did. So that is companies giving money to people writing open source software as a way to thank them and say, we value your work, thank you. Okay, so that's all the setup. For now, you've got an open source project and it's got money coming into it, okay? Now here's the question that we're here to talk about tonight. The 15 of us in this room are collaborators on an open source project, all right? And we do it for the love of work because it's fun, and it's fun to work together, and it's fun to be in a shared community of work. Now we introduce money into the equation. Now there's $10,000 that's come into this room from Facebook because of the work that we did together. When we were doing the work, we weren't thinking about money, right? We were thinking about how fun this work is and how awesome it is to work together. But now there's $10,000 sitting in the middle of the room. Right? How are we going to split it up? That's the question. That's the problem that Take What You Want Conversations designed to solve. So, my answer is obviously out on the table. But that's the fundamental question, right? Is you've got a community of people that love to work together for its own sake. It's a good in its own right to work together, okay? But now you've got $10,000 in the middle, and, honestly, it takes money to live in the world, right? And we want to use money to thank other people that do work that we appreciate, right? So it's not, money's not evil. The money's sitting there in the middle, and it's not. There's some folks that want to say, DHH wrote a piece. David Heinemeier Hansen, the creator of Ruby on Rails, wrote a piece a couple years ago about the perils of mixing open source and money, mixing money and open source. And he's drawing on this, tradition of behavioral economics, this field of behavioral economics, which is saying that money has a psychological effect on people where it changes motivation and changes kind of the tenor of a community when you mix money into voluntary communities that are motivated by something other than money as the forefront. When you mix money into it, there's a problem there. So that's the problem we're sitting here looking at. Is now there's $10,000 in the middle of the room. How are we going to split it up? So the answer that Ricardo Semler came up with, in the 80s and that Morningstar practiced and others, is this idea of self-set salaries. So we're picking up on this practice that's introduced in the 80s, and we're applying it to now this open source context, where you've got not just full-time employees working at a manufacturing plant in Brazil, but you've got communities of people all over the world working different amounts, over the internet on these projects. And so how do you take this idea of self-set salaries and adapt it to the open source context? Can we, how am I doing? Let's feedback. What questions? What's coming to mind? How would you split that $10,000 in the middle? Yeah.
So why do we need to split it? If we're all doing it because we like the work.
Okay.
Why do we need to split it in the first place? Why can't we, use it to buy better service for everyone? Something like that, or give it to charity.
Okay. Split it, servers, give it to charity. You can. Okay, so that's certainly a valid thing to do. I think the idea would be that personally, I want my work life, I want to work, and I don't want my work life to be split between my open source work and then my job, right? This concept of the job, which is this sort of artificial construct that puts an artificial scarcity on the abundance of work. So that would be my basic answer is I don't, we'd have to dial back and say, all right, I need money to live, right? It's kind of the classic way to put it. So if I do that, in this case, then I have this other problem over here, which is that I need some source of income personally to support, how was I saying it earlier, to be able to thank all the people whose work I depend on every day for my food and my shelter and my entertainment and whatever it is, right? So I need some, I want money so that I can give it to the people whose work I value, okay? And I would love, if it's not going to come from this $10,000 in the middle, it's going to have to come from somewhere else. And I want to spend more time in communities of work, like we are already in together here, than having to go to this other system to get the money that I'm going to use to thank people. Is that I'm shooting from the hip here. What do you think? Is that convincing or what?
So I guess in some sense, if you've heard of Steven Pinker, he talks about this idea, and I think he did sense in the 90s or the 80s, somewhere around that time, of the cognitive surplus.
Okay.
Right, that people have all this excess time once you take care of their basic needs, and they can do stuff with it.
Okay.
In my mind, the reason that this concept comes up around open source is because you can monetize what comes out.
Okay.
Right.
You can't monetize?
You can.
Okay,
right?
you can
so
monetize.
I started if I started doing knitting in my spare time.
Okay.
Of something really commoditized, like hats, for example.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
It's unlikely people want to buy that if it's similar to what I can get off the shelf.
Okay.
It has to have something unique.
Yeah.
Maybe some
Unique
IDC
value
type.
proposition.
In some sense, software is not like that,
Okay.
right? Because the standards for software,
Mhm.
even though they're being used as infrastructure in some sense,
Okay.
are not standard.
Okay.
But still, they're evolving. Like
Okay.
if you want to build a building,
You want
I
custom? There's always going to be a need for customization of software.
right?
Okay.
And so that can be monetized. So
Okay.
I agree with you in that. Like it's nice if people take their own
Mhm.
remuneration in some form, maybe not necessarily money.
Mhm.
I'm not sure I agree on the part that that's even possible without jobs.
Okay, so I think what I hear you saying is, in terms of monetization, is about getting the money into the project in the first place. Is that fair? Because I was kind of bracketing that question, right? Like, why is there $10,000 plot down here? I was kind of citing PHK as an example of like, well, here's one way that that's actually happened, right, in the world is that, he's gotten hundreds of thousands of euros over the past 7 years for developing Varnish using this model, right? So there's other viable models. So I don't actually care for the purposes of this talk how the money gets in. You know what I mean? It could be, selling burgers or whatever, like for $4 a pop, and the money's in there. My question here, the question I'm inviting us to consider together here is, once that money's in there, and you've got this community of people who are there for the love of the work and not just for the paycheck, right? That's the question I'm asking us to chew on. Is like, how do you split that money up once it's inside?
I think you could make a decent argument to what you're saying by emphasizing what you just touched on at the very end of your mistake you made. It's just saying that like the more that you can extract an income from your open source work, the less that you have to depend on an external source of income and therefore you can devote more time to this open source income, the open source project, without having to leave that to go do something else for that job.
Yeah. I mean, and it is a job, right? It's a job. It's like you do work and you get money, right? So it's more of a marketing thing to say, right? That it's like, it's kind of a marketing thing, but more of a personal marketing thing to say, like, what's your attitude towards it, right? Because, like, honestly, a job for a lot of people sounds really awesome. You know what I mean? Like, there's tons of people in the world that would love a job, and don't have a lot of time and interest and energy to work for free, right? A lot of privilege to work for free as a hobby, like a lot of us enjoy. So, so it's not, I mean, right, fundamentally you're doing work and you're getting money that you can use to pay for things, right? I'm just trying to almost reframe, and so you could work, on the 35th floor of the U.S. Steel Tower for PNC Bank in a cubicle, and if your internal frame of reference was, you could be a Lego in that system, right? Like, I love this. I'm so excited to be here working on this, right? Like, that's an attitude that's available to you always. Personally, I find it easier to live out of that place when I'm in a more open sourcey kind of environment.
I think fundamentally that we're missing a difference in those two worlds, right? Which is like we're teetering on the edge of intrinsic and extrinsic motivators, right?
Yep.
And it's like the piece of it, from my perspective, that we're missing.
Yeah.
That the reason, why did I go in, I don't know, Joe Nelson's project in Postgres 2 months ago, bang out a bunch of code, and like, there's a hole in this thing, I'm going to fix this.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity there.
You had way different hair last time we talked.
I did.
Yeah.
Now you remember. I used to have hair.
Yeah.
So, but the piece we're missing is meaning, right?
Okay.
Why do we do that stuff? Why do you do things that are intrinsically motivating you? And the answer is meaning.
Yeah.
Money sans all of its other attachments.
It only goes so far.
Lacks meaning, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, it means a lot below $70,000 a year is kind of what the research says, right? Like once you've got that baseline, then it's that surplus, the cognitive surplus.
When the people on the 35th floor that you're describing, the vast majority, right, are not there because of meaning. And they very well may not expect that job to deliver meaning, right? They go to work and they get a paycheck, right? And that provides value for their family and all the traditional things. But I think I think what the argument you're making is interesting because it has the potential to tie up what we're lacking as a country, which is
not as country, as a civilization.
the impetus to do great work and be competitive, right?
Okay.
Which to me has very little to do with money. It's all about intrinsic motivators, from my perspective.
All right. Let's take a couple more, and then I think we want to dive into the meat of GradaPay here too, and see that. Did you have your hand up?
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
So listening to all you guys,
Please.
something came to mind. An old episode of Star Trek.
Okay.
Captain Kirk, Spock, I know, was getting beamed back to Earth.
Yeah.
1930s. And when they beam in, Captain Kirk says, "These people are still using money. Let's go get some." So I don't know what
Let's go get some.
Gene Roddenberry's ideal of the future was, but it was a future without money.
Yeah, I love money, but in its place, right? Like because serving that desire to be generous and grateful for things. Okay, can we pause there? And because there's a lot there's a lot of rabbit holes to go down. So this is where we came to with GradaPay. So GradaPay is set the stage here. GradaPay is a payments company. So what we provide is a way for what I was describing with PHK, the Varnish Moral License. We turn that into a product, okay? So that any open source programmer team can come and add their project, sign up on GradaPay, and then the Facebooks of the world can give money to your open source project on GradaPay. That's our product. And we launched 4 years ago, and we saw kind of a burst of interest, and then we crashed and burned really hard, and then relaunched a year ago. So could show you our charts. We won't get into it. So we relaunched a year ago, and this is actually this is my first public appearance in the open source community in the past at least year, maybe 2 years, I think since 2 years ago. So we're starting to ramp up again. Learned a lot the first 3 years. Right, so that's what GradaPay is. And so we're a payments, we have this payments product, and so we do both sides. We do the money coming in, Facebook giving Varnish $10,000, and then we also have a product for distributing that money to your open source team, and that's the take what you want piece. So we implemented it, we ran with it for 2 years. So we think of it as a pilot project. We had this 2-year pilot project with take what you want compensation. We had over, let me get my, this is where I got get the right computer. I guess let's do this one next. So this is some stats that are not well presented and hard to read. This is on a GitHub ticket about writing up the story of take what you want compensation. All told, 336 people. So we had about $50,000 moved total through the system. So not a huge amount of money, but enough to kind of start to see where the pressure points were going to be. And we had about 100 teams participating. There were 2 teams that comprised the bulk of the volume. One was the Drupal content management system, which is a fairly popular, well-known content management system. They had a little skunkworks project where they were using GradaPay, take what you want distribution, and then GradaPay itself, because GradaPay runs on GradaPay both for the receiving money in and for the distributing money to people working on it. So Drupal was interesting so we'll talk about Drupal for a second, and then I'll talk about GradaPay more. So Drupal was interesting because they are obviously a well-established project, as I was saying, and so they had about 200 contributors when they showed up and tried to use GradaPay. And they only had a small amount of money available for people to take. So they had, they had tons more demand than supply in terms of the take what you want distribution. So it was never to the point where any individual contributor had enough, was actually depending heavily on their Drupal income from the Drupal team on GradaPay. So it was interesting to see some of the ways that a large team like that needed the system to function, but we really didn't see it being something that people were depending on as a primary source of income for them, which is what we're looking for, right? The point is to actually replace salaries and jobs with this take what you want kind of system. Okay, so that was Drupal. GradaPay moved about, what are my figures? We had about 100 people participate over the course of 2 years, and we moved, what do I have, 36? No, 20. We moved about $20,000, $22,000 total. So again, not huge amounts of money, but there were a few of us who were depending on it as a source of income. Obviously a very meager income. At the most, there were two of us who were taking $400 or $500 a month from it, from the GradaPay team itself. And so it was obviously not a full salary replacement for us, but it was enough to start to feel like, hey, this matters. Like if this were to go away, it would seriously impact. And it did go away. We called it the Gradapocalypse last year when everything fell apart, and it mattered. It mattered to us. Yeah, so we got to see some of the stress points and some of the tensions that arose in the system. Right, so I think that's really the interesting thing about the whole story is that over the course of 2 years, so you think about, take what you want salaries, everyone's going to set their own salary. We've got $10,000 in the middle of the room. We've all been working together, busy bees, ants building this. Doozers, do you remember Fraggle Rock? I know this guy likes Fraggle Rock. Anybody remember Fraggle Rock? It was like Jim Henson after the Muppets, and he had this show in the 90s or something, right? What's that?
It was on HBO.
Yeah, okay. Daily Motion has all the episodes. So go watch it. The Doozers are the busy bee ants. So we're all Doozers working together because we love work. Now this is $10,000. How are we going to split it? And gosh, I lost my train of thought. Where was I? What was I about to say? Lessons. So the interesting thing, I think, is to look at where it failed, because the question is, who's going to take how much, right? And what happens when somebody takes too much, right? That's really the crux of it. It's like, well, if a boss is setting salaries, then there's control, right? And it's you can't have somebody take the whole $10,000 and run out the door, right? So we put some. So let's talk about that. This is the heart of what I want to talk about, what I want to share with you. Please.
I haven't used GradaPay. Do people know who took out how much?
Yes. So this is what it looks like. This is a screenshot of our UI for setting your take. This is public to the whole internet, or it was. This is a screenshot from a year ago. This is actually, I went back in old backups and dug up the moment and went in Git history and rewound the website to get the screenshot of the moment just before the Gradapocalypse. So this is the moment when we were most heavily dependent on GradaPay. So you can see we have 47 people on the team. What it shows you is this is your take last week. How much? It's a weekly cycle. So every Thursday's payday, and what you're setting is this is the dollar amount that I want to take out this week. So there's an estimate. This $475.88 at the top is an estimate of what GradaPay is going to receive that week. So that's your top line income. Everybody can see that and set their take accordingly. So this shows you what your take was last week, what your take is set at this week, and then this is a running balance going down, and then this is your take this week as a percentage of the total. Everybody can see this, not just within the team, but everybody on the internet can see it in this initial pilot implementation. So that information is public, right? You have to have that information public. That's one of the preconditions for this to work.
And do the people know these people in real life?
Most of these folks we just know on the internet. It's an open source community, right? So we held some in-person events. Some of you have been out to my house for the GradaPay company retreat, and so it's that mix of some folks you know and you've met in person, and some just on the internet. So going down here, one of the key features of our first implementation, there were two. Well, let me say that. The last person to be added was the first one to take money each week. So Brayreem was was that your friend?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, so this is just after she was added to the team, and so the manager can only add you, when the manager adds you, they add you at a penny. and then the manager can't set your take after that. The software does not allow anyone except you to, someone signed in using your account, to change your take. Okay? But the manager can add and remove people. All right? So the manager can remove people. We'll get to that in a second. So kids eat first, we called it, because the last person added is the first one to take. So down here at the bottom, you can see this is me, Wit537, and I'm the last person to take. So if everybody else takes all the money in a given week, I don't get any, is how the system is set up, right? But everyone can see it, so if I don't get any money, then it's like somebody took too much, and everybody can see who it was that took too much. So what ends up happening is it's the social pressure that keeps it all in checks and balances. And so you asked if these are people that knew each other. There's certainly people that trust each other, right? So it depends on the success conditions for take what you want, as we've done it, is number one, you have to have transparency. You have to share information with each other. And number two, you have to have openness. You have to be willing to share control with each other, share decision-making with each other. And so that really requires a high trust context. You're not going to have 10,000 people on this list. Dunbar's number of 150 that we can keep in our head at one time, right? So it requires a high trust team for it to function. But it also builds trust in a team that uses it. So this is what the user interface looked like to set your take. I'm logged in as me. If you're logged in as somebody else, you would see a box there, and you just type the number and you hit return, and then, where am I? That's bad.
Well, no, it's okay. It's just
What happened?
came loose. We're good.
So what was that? 10 minutes of
No,
blank screen talking directly about this? Okay.
it was like 10
Okay.
It was like 10 seconds.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. So does this help you conceptualize what the system looked like and what the experience of it was actually using it? But the thing is, these are all people that you work with, right? You're all, we work primarily on GitHub, and at the time we're using IRC a lot too. There again, come on.
Nothing's moving.
Yeah. So again, going back to that moment we had a few minutes ago, where we love working together for its own sake. We're working on this project. Yeah.
So one more thing, say I'm one of the people on this list.
Sure.
Can I see a history of how much other people look at, like a percentage of the total take and things like that?
I don't think if I remember right, we never got to that. No, pull request accepted. It just didn't come together before we rebooted. We show you last week's, right? So you have some sense, and so it becomes this weekly rhythm. So one of the ways that we modified the self-set salaries of Semco and Morningstar is, instead of making it an annual ritual, where everybody comes together and once a year you submit your salary letter or whatever. This was every week. This was you could change your take. Anybody could change their take at any time, and it wasn't just for full-time people, right? Obviously, we have a lot of people here that are at a penny a week. Those are people that showed up. We added them. You add people really early, their first time they show up or first pull request or whatever. Pick the policy for your project. But it's designed to be really low friction, right? Just add people, get them in, and then maybe they go up, maybe they go down. But if they're there at a penny a week for 2 years, it's not a big deal, right? Right. So this is the way that the system basically functions. It's kind of the normal function of the system. And the two main ways that we tweaked it from self-set salaries so that we made it really easy, so it was a natural rhythm. It's and you didn't have to sync it up. It's someone's life circumstances change and they just change their take. And next time I'm in there 2 weeks later, I have to notice. We actually did color code it. So it would pop from that list. When someone changed their take, you could see, this person changed theirs, and once we did that. And then, so you could set your take at any time, and it worked you could set it to any amount, so it worked for salaried and part-time. You okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hi, Internet! Yay! Let's talk about when people took too much. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
No? You don't want to talk about that?
Oh, I thought you said have we talked.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can we talk about that? Yeah, okay. Well, you can just go to the bar if you want.
Keep
Happened 3 times. during 2 years. Okay. The first time it happened was 4 months into the experiment. And the person that was involved was a longtime team member. So someone who I actually did know in real life. We sprinted together in person and whatnot. And right before, they didn't like Take What You Want. They didn't think that we should go that route. They liked what's called a rankings-based approach, where instead of each deciding our own, we all vote on each other. Okay? Peer assessment, which we tried very briefly before we switched to Take What You Want. And this person didn't think we should switch to Take What You Want. So they were just they were a little salty, let's say, right? So after 4 months, so actually they wrote a script that was like, set my amount. They also didn't like that you had to manually log in and change it. They're a hacker. They're like, I'm just going to write, replace this with a tiny bash script kind of thing. So they, wrote it's actually a Python script. Wrote a script, set their take. After 4 months, through whatever fluctuations, like their take was just way out of line. It was like, and so on IRC, I went in on IRC. I said, okay, hey man, what's your thought process here? What's going on? And it's kicked off this conversation. A couple other people joined in, and we had this conversation. It's like 90 minutes long, and just gave him a chance to air his grievances and say like, well, this is why I think that the Take What You Want system's bad. It's too hard for me to set my take as a percentage. It's it's limited in these ways, and obviously it's too easy for me to take too much because apparently I'm taking too much. It's like, and so there was some validity in what he was saying, right? Like there were limitations to the system. And by talking it through, we came up with a ticket, and he modified his script. So we had some productive. It was a standard workflow that open source is just bread and butter for open source, right? Like somebody comes in with a gripe, and you're like, all right, let's figure out how to fix it. You've probably got a point, so let's figure out how to fix it. So we did that, and after the end of this 90-minute conversation, it was really like 4 months into it, like this was still a new system, right? It was like the first test of this system. And like I say, other people were involved in the conversation. And so there was a lot of it was just sort of us wrapping our heads around what does this mean and how do we think about this? Somebody else, who at the outset, somebody else said, I was really unsure this at the outset, 4 months into it, I think it's pretty interesting, but I'm having a hard time understanding what I should set my take to. And we came up with this idea that you should set your take based on your own internal guilt and resentment. Okay? So there's $10,000 in the middle, and there's 15 of us around the room, whatever, a dozen of us. Everyone should take an amount that perfectly balances their own internal guilt and resentment. All right? In other words, if I take too much, and it's not, everybody sees what everybody else is taking too, right? So there's a feedback loop there before we actually split it, right? So you can see what everybody else is taking because you know what everybody else has done, right? Like we all have that awareness of, I know how much work you've put in. Human psychology, we're really good at relative judgments, okay? We're really good at making relative assessments rather than absolute assessments. So I like your face there. I'm going to have to dig up the source on that one. But we know, right? Like we have a sense of fairness. We have a sense of justice. We have a sense that, like, it doesn't have to be absolute. Yeah.
Do they come up with a system of, like, checks and balances? Like, if somebody takes too much, do they help the other person, like, fulfill their balance the way they pay it back to them? Or does the other person have to pay everything all back? Yeah.
So if somebody's really taking too much, like they're just trying to be mean and steal all the money, then you kick them off the team, right? Yeah. So it is possible to kick somebody off the team if they're just trying to take the money and run. Okay. Inside of that, though, it's really, in our implementation, it's a social thing. It's like my friend, after 4 months, he was taking too much, and I had to go talk to him. I said, "Hey, man, why are you taking this much? Like, did your pet frog die and you're sad you need a new frog? Like, what's going on in your life? Like, obviously there's an underlying issue." And so the lesson from that first stress test for me, was that takes become information. Money becomes information about the social reality of the team. When you trust everyone with control of that figure, money becomes information about the social reality of your team. So if money is out of balance, time out. Stop, pause. Let's find that root cause. We're not even going to talk about money. Like money is the symptom. And my daughter was in Children's Hospital 6 months ago. She had blurry vision, double vision, okay? It turned out to be this weird cerebral spinal fluid disorder called idiopathic intracranial hypertension, which basically means we have no idea why you're messed up, but you are, so we're going to give you these drugs for 6 months. Now she's fine. But the point is, the double vision was a symptom, okay? It wasn't a cause, and we had to get down to a cause before we could solve the double vision, right? Symptoms and causes. So when you see the money out of balance, you have to drop down and say, pause. Who's frustrated about what? Why, or frustrated about what? Or, what else is going on in your life? What's the underlying cause? Have the conversation down here, do that work. Then the really wonderful, fun thing is that after you do that work, the takes just magically rebalance, right? And to reflect the new social reality of the team, and it becomes this team-building exercise, right? It actually builds up, increases the trust that the team has in each other.
So in your implementation,
Yeah.
you have people setting their own takes.
Yeah.
And then after, and that's all public, but what is the lag? For like 7 days, you set it for the next week, and then you get paid a week later?
In our implementation, it was instant. In the sense that if you set it, we actually run the payday script manually. So it's like if you set it the minute before, I might have done this once or twice, like because I was the one running the script. It's like, actually, I wanted to change my take. So I change my take and then run the script, and it reflects that new take.
So it's always, in this case, it's always what has been taken rather than what is going to be taken.
Well,
You report
sorry.
people.
You're saying, like, if I set it on Tuesday, it's a weekly cycle. So every Thursday is when it runs. So if I set it on Tuesday, then Thursday, if I say on Tuesday I want $50 this week, then on Thursday I'm going to get $50.
Yeah.
Okay? Does that answer your question?
It seems like you wind up having this problem with information asymmetry based on when each person decides to make their decision.
In our new implementation, so we're in the process of working really hard to bring this back. And we're first going to bring it back just for the GradaPay team itself before we productize it for everybody else. So that's actually our top development priority right now, is bringing it back for the GradaPay teams. We've been thinking a lot about version 2 and what it's going to look like. And we're going to tweak that in version 2, right? So it's going to be, there's going to be a cutoff date. Our plan right now is a cutoff of Wednesday at noon UTC. The whole team gets an email blast, here's the new take. So there is a little 24-hour period or whatever.
The other thing I was curious about is how did you settle on the week rhythm or frequency? Like that seems to be probably causal in some of this.
So that was baked in from the very beginning of GradaPay, back when we were called GetTip. And it was really a function of laziness, not wanting to compute wackiness around months. A week is 7 days, a month is not a fixed time. So it was just made the math easier for recurring billing to do. So, and that was before we even offered payouts at all.
And it sort of fits into a neat paycheck sort of frequency.
Yes, and so then, so when you get to the paycheck idea, exactly,
Yeah.
the payouts idea, it kind of fits. Yeah.
One of the other reasons that we stuck to a week, if I remember, was that it gave sufficient time for errors to be recovered. So if and not errors in processing, but like if somebody suddenly saw a massive drop off in what they were receiving as an individual, then they could remedy that much quicker than a monthly payout.
Yeah.
They would have the confidence to have
Right.
that as an income source, not as effectively a bonus.
Yeah. Daniel,
Yeah, I was wondering what happens if, for some reason, the person does real well.
Okay.
Like they do a good job of programming,
Uh-huh.
and they find other people to bring into the
Yeah, so that definitely is the idea. Is that, I mean, when you're doing the work, you're increasing the value of the project, and more Facebooks are putting more money in the top. But really, in terms of giving them a bonus, it's still take what you want. You know, it's like if you think you deserve a bonus, then take a bonus, and if nobody complains, then you deserved it. You know? That's really what it's about. It's about being in enough connection with each other to know, and being emotionally attuned with each other to know that, hey, I can do this, and I'm still within its ranges. Like, again, it's like a principle of psychology. Like, we think in ranges. Like, how much is a cup of coffee worth? Anywhere from $1 to $4, $5, $6, right? Like, there's a range there, right? It's not worth $50, right? And it's worth more than zero. But as long as it's in a range, you don't you're not gonna say time out, pause, we have to talk about something unless it really breaks out of that range, right? So it's that slack in the system that allows it to kind of fluctuate, right? So it's like you're shifting and you're changing a little bit everybody all the time, and it's only when something goes really out, stretches and kind of breaks beyond that range. That's what I'm calling these stress tests, right? That you have to pause, take the time out.
So basically, the participants in the open source, from their social connectedness with others, working so often with others,
You're working
they
together,
sort of
yes.
tune themselves in, and knowing how much they're sort of socially okay to act.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in some of the scaled up systems like Semco and Morningstar, they formalize that process with review boards and advice committees. So you'll have so every year you say, this is what I think my salary should be next year, and there's a review a review board elected from the company, so it's democratic, that reviews those and gives you advice. Says, hey, you're kind of out of line with what everybody else is doing. So you can formalize those. In our implementation, it was small scale enough that it worked just to keep it pretty low fi.
An interesting comparison.
Uh-huh.
At a large flea market,
Okay.
with, say, 1,000 vendors.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of merchandise,
Uh-huh.
unique items from the last 80 years.
Sure.
The sellers
Rogers.
really don't
Ohio.
have a clue on how much an item is worth. But what they do is, say, 2 years before, while they were walking around the flea market, and they saw an object that caught their attention, and they asked how much you want for it. 2 years later, they happen to have that same object.
Now they have some information.
And they sort of remember that, and they'll ask the same amount.
There you go. All right, so that was stress test number 1. We had somebody taking too much, and it became a source of information for us to have a deeper conversation. So the lesson there for us was that takes are information. Stress test number 2 was, gosh, I don't have my dates fixed, but it was like it was a year into it. So it's 6 months later. So we went months in between having to talk about this at all, right? Just chugging along, and we forgot about it and just did our work. The second time we had accumulated a long tail. You see there was 47 folks on, can I do this? There's this.
The internet won't see it.
Okay.
The room will see it.
Okay. You can see here there's 47 folks on the list there. We had 77. Okay, we had accumulated a bunch of one centers. All right, and so some of the core members of the team, there's maybe 6 or 8 core folks, and there was a little grumbling, right? Like, hey, we've got all of this long tail, and it's getting kind of crowded. Can we thin it out a little bit? And it was like 5% of the money, so it was this little tax on top, right? So it was like 5% of our money was going to these contributors who are no longer active. No problem that they weren't active. That's a normal part of open source life. But something to manage as a team. So we opened a GitHub ticket, which is what we always do, and we talked about it. We identified who the folks were, and we came up with a plan for reaching out to them and letting them know and whatever. And so that went fine, except for one person, right? So one person came back, and I don't even think it was right away. It was like, I tried, we had some back and forth. I tried communicating with them, and it was just not connecting. It was like, you are really not understanding how this is supposed to work. Like, you've done almost no work, and you're taking more than a penny, and you're just not getting it. So that was the one time in 2 years that I exercised the nuclear option of, at that point we'd already removed them from the team, but essentially it was against their will, right? Like, we didn't reach that consensus together with them, but that was the right decision to make. So that was gross, but it's not the end of the world. And to be honest, the lesson we took from that is that you just have to expect it. Like, you're gonna have somebody that doesn't get it in any organization, and you just have to expect it and manage it and move on.
Is that what you meant when you said emotional work in the beginning?
Big part of it. Yeah. That 90-minute conversation to find out why is your take up here.
Right.
That's emotional work. That's a lot of.
So in a sense,
takes a lot of energy.
The money becomes a leading indicator
Absolutely.
of those problems
Absolutely.
and allows you to kind of quantify it.
Absolutely.
In a
Absolutely.
way. Is that
Absolutely.
fair? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's it. That's nail on the head. So then management, right? First of all, management can be decentralized because everybody sees everybody has the information, right? So people that that want to self-select into that role and or that you want to encourage into that role can do so on a fairly equal footing because everyone has the information. But so management is emotional labor. It's like helping humans get along and cooperate to achieve a task together, right? And money becomes a leading indicator for those kind of problems.
That's interesting.
I think it's super fun. I love it, because when we started this, when we started having enough money in GradaPay to need to distribute it to our contributors, like the last thing I wanted to do as the founder of the project was decide for everyone on the team what they should get. That is not a responsibility I want. I don't want to be a boss like that. I don't want that responsibility. And it's just because the optimal amount of money is pegged to everyone's guilt and resentment, and I don't have that information. As the boss, I have no idea what's going on in your head. I have no idea, I have some idea, right? But I don't have nearly the information that you do, right? About what you think is fair. And if you have this, especially when it's closed, and nobody knows what anybody else is taking, that's just a breeding ground for discontent and for ill feeling on the team, and for sneakiness and what are they making and what am I? And I'm not getting enough, and I should, and all the bullshit. Who wants to deal with that? Not me. And it's unhealthy for a team. So that's kind of, and so then when this idea came along of doing self-set salaries, take what you want, we jumped on it. How are we doing? Can we do the third stress test?
I have a question.
Yeah.
You used the nuclear option on that one person.
Yeah.
How do you prevent a system where a team leader just
Uses it too much?
keeps using it and like you are the benevolent dictator in that situation because you
Quasi-benevolent.
you have the keys. How do you prevent it for the malevolent dictator?
It can be really demoralizing to a team.
So in the open source world, we have the fork. That's the answer. GradaPay's already had 2 forks, not over issues like that, over other issues. Actually, one of the forks is where I ended up getting, earning the appellation quasi-benevolent dictator. Yes, but that's ultimately the answer. Because, Bruce Adams, some of you know, he made the point. I should bring up the quote because he said it really well, but ultimately it does come down to the people. If the people aren't good, then no law and no rule and no technical feature of the software is going to protect us, which is scary and thrilling at the same time. No seatbelts.
Does the software help
Or
with
seatbelts,
the
but no
project from the
guarantees.
standpoint of that problem, though, in terms of so there's some data science and stuff you could do to say, what are the outliers?
Oh, yeah.
The data is probably really, even just simple analytics, forget about fancy stuff.
Yeah, well, as simple as just showing what everyone's take is, right? And having it enforced in the software that only you can set your own take, so that you don't have that, because people would sometimes be like, well, shouldn't the manager be able to? But no, it's like, no, because that really makes it clear to everyone can trust that. Everyone on the team can trust that that is a true reflection of only that person's thinking, because only they were able to set it. Right?
So with you as the, whatever you want to call it, BDFO, or how far does that scale? I mean, you said you got the 77 people. If that was 770 or 7,700, 77,000, where do you lose your mind?
Yeah, so in terms of scaling it up, like I was saying a minute ago, Semco and Morningstar give us the example of having a review board, making it a little more formalized process. You're going to have to formalize it more. Then the other thing is to decompose your teams, right? To say, all right, now there's 150 of us, now there's 2 teams of 75, right? And we work out the boundaries between the two. There's different brands or whatever it is, different units within the company, whatever it is. Yeah, we didn't reach that point of scale, so I don't have the answers from experience for you. But, again, we didn't invent this. We're not the first ones to this game, so there's some examples of ways to approach that.
Were you able to assess the impact of this on people's intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation?
Yeah, so that's actually, thank you for asking that question. That leads into our third stress test. 18 months in, we were a little out of line again, and this time I started the conversation. And this time it wasn't about the long tail folks, it was about the core contributors. There was 6 or 8 of us at the core, and my feeling at the time was, there's half of us that are pulling our weight relative to the amount that we're taking, and half of us where it's out of line. And so I made a ticket on GitHub, said timeout, let's talk about this. And we kind of went through the exercise. We talked about it. You can go read it on GitHub and IRC logs if you want. And you can see the conclusions we reached. Basically, a few people, the folks, the conversation was, how can we help you increase your productivity, and/or would you be willing to take less? So it's really important to be quasi-benevolent and approach it from the aspect of we're having a conversation here, you have agency in this. This isn't me telling you what to do. This isn't me attacking you or undermining you or distrusting you, right? This is me trusting you enough to have a conversation, right? And the outcome was that we made some work arrangements to try and help people increase their productivity, and the 3 people involved, decreased their takes a little bit too, to back within that range. And again, it wasn't so far. It was a little outside of what was a normal, or what some others of us felt was fair, and so they just brought it a little back in line. And the big lesson was, it works. Nobody blew it. It didn't blow up. Didn't blow up the team. Our team was fine. It's not even. I don't even want to say we survived, because it wasn't an ordeal. There was no fireworks. There was no drama. It was just here's another ticket. We had the ticket. We had the conversation. Back to normal. And at the same time, we had many people still in that long tail, right? So we didn't alienate the folks that were there. And actually, some folks, it wasn't always the case that money was reflective of how much work people were doing. We had some people that were doing it much more volunteer, right? And they're like, hey, I have a good job. I don't need the money. I'm going to take less because I know others of you are really working pretty full time on this and really depending on that income, right? So in the context of a high trust team, you can have that kind of give and take. So that was really the main takeaway from the whole experience, the whole experiment, was it works. You can add an economic layer to an open source team without killing intrinsic motivation, without crowding out the volunteers, because everyone's taking at least a penny a week. It worked, man. It was super fun.
The theory is that the extrinsic motivation displaces the intrinsics and overtakes it, and people get to where they just will not work for anything but money. But what you're saying is that you found a different route to that.
So, and there's 2 things that can happen. One is that the fact that many people are getting paid can crowd out the volunteers. Why should I work for free if everybody else is getting paid, right? And this system solves that because it gives everybody the chance to take more if they want more, right? And it's only if you're comfortable with a penny a week that you're taking a penny a week. It's your fault. It's your job. It's your problem, right? At the same time, you're in a high trust environment already, right? So if there is somebody that's doing, and we did this a couple times too, right? Like, I should probably go and dig those up. If you're not taking enough, it's like, hey, come on, you should, part of leadership in an environment like this is giving people permission, and someone's like, oh, I should, I don't want to take too much. I don't do enough around here. It's like, no, you should, you're allowed. Take a little more, right? So the one way that it can crowd out, that money can kill a system like this or kill a voluntary association, is by crowding out those volunteers. The other way is by crowding out the intrinsic motivation of the people that are doing it for the money. And so there you would look at, the couple of us that were depending on it for income. And personally, I can report from me and the other friend, the other fellow that was at 110 a week or whatever. So here's me at 110 a week, WIT 537. Shango Co-op here is at 110 a week. He actually forked GratiPay last year, and it's called NiveraPay. I'll give him a plug. It's for you. And we met last month, 2 months ago, for the first time. He was in France, so we got to hang out together. It was really nice. So he and I were both dependent on it, and I can say pretty confidently for him and with absolute confidence for me that it did not ruin my intrinsic motivation. And ultimately, the idea with GratiPay is to have a whole world. In 5 years, how many of you have set your own salary, set your own take? Have a whole world of these, right? Thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds and millions of teams, of companies, of teams, open organizations. So if I get burned out on this one, first of all, I'm not doing this one, probably, right? Like I was saying, last summer I was landscaping 1 day a week, right? And right now I'm working on GratiPay half-time, and I'm working on Center for Open Science half-time, right? To have a few of these teams that you're part of, So maybe I'm burned out on this, so I'm going to go work on this a little more. Maybe I'm going to keep this, drop my take, but stay on that team. Maybe I'm going to leave that team. So much more fluid working in the way that open source already exists, right?
Be a little simple.
Please.
There's an emotional cost in making that decision on what my bid is.
Yeah.
Especially as this scales up.
Sure.
Right? Even for a single project, forget about multiple projects. You have to think, how nice was this person in the last month? How much work did they do? What's the relative value of that, and so on.
Yep. Yes.
In your experience,
Yeah.
why do you think? Well, maybe not why, but where do you think the limit would be of paying that emotional cost versus I take a job, I negotiate upfront what my salary is, and that's it. You pay it one time.
Yeah.
The cost might be equal.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know, but I'm saying, where do you think that trade-off is?
My tendency is to try and solve that equation experimentally by scaling the system up and finding out where it is. Certainly, for plenty of people, they would look at this and be like, oh my God, that sounds terrifying and horrible, and why would I ever want to be part of something like that? That's fine, sure. I'm trying to build something that doesn't require that this goes away. If this is the kind of world you want to live in, then be in that kind of world, and it's money. Money's fungible. We can move money around. I can be in this kind of organization over here. You can be in that kind over there. It's fine. So it's going to be, so there's two ways to approach it. One is what's that limit individually, and that's for each of us to answer, right? And then the macro question: what's that limit societally or culturally or something? And that'll just have to play out evolutionarily as the system, as these kinds of systems take root. I don't have I don't have an equation, I guess, a theoretical. I'm bad at coming up with a theoretical model that gives an answer to that question. I'd rather just go do it and be like, what did we observe? Where did it actually play out?
I see individuals not feeling comfortable in one ecosystem, maybe because they're not socially connected and they don't seem to get the feedback or distribution they feel they deserve. They may quit one open source project and join another one.
Yeah.
And on this other one, instead, and we have totally different feedback.
Yeah, we're trying to build a system to have some play. So, for example, for different styles on different projects, it's really up to a project to decide when you're going to add somebody. Is it when they first show up and make a comment on your issue tracker? Is it when they give you their first pull request? What are your requirements for a pull request? You know what I mean? So there's ways to tune who can get in on the team, right? Another thing that we're building into the new iteration is that the team sets the amount that's available every week. Okay, so the idea is that because on the first iteration, it was really tied to how much the GratiPay team was receiving. So it's which is actually a really bad design, because what company runs? I mean, that's the definition of a company that's in trouble, is you're operating hand to mouth, right? It's the money that you're getting in this same payday script run is the money that's available to pay your salaries. That's not your company, right? You have cash in reserve, and your accounts payable and your accounts receivable are separate things, and your receivable comes into your cash reserve and your payable goes down. It doesn't matter whether you made $500 this week, you're still going to have the $500 that you're going to pay out over here, right? So you need to decouple those two, and that was not a feature just for historical reasons of the old system. It's going to be a new one. So the idea is, you'll say, so for GratiPay, we're going to start with $50 a week. When we come out, we're going to say $50 a week, because GratiPay, we think that we can sustain that. Given our revenue, from the past year, we think we can sustain $50 a week in distributions for the foreseeable future. Because you want to build, have the company have the team be a solid foundation that individuals can do their own financial planning on, right? And if it's tied to a possibly highly variable income, then that's harder for the individual to do. So we're going to say, there's $50 a week, and that's going to be what's available for people to split up. And then it'll be a company decision to raise or lower that kind of a slower rate at a company scale rather than at a company time scales than individual time scales. How did I get there? How are we doing? It's 8:30 here. We're probably maybe 15 more minutes, or what? People doing all right? We're going strong? Okay.
I had a question about the work that you did in the beginning and starting it in week 1.
I'll get my water. Yeah.
In week 1, you said I'm getting a penny, but really that work lasted to week 50, where you were making, I don't know, 110. But really, I mean, that one piece of work, extrinsically, it was worth $50,000, really, because the whole project exists around that piece of work.
Yeah, this again is part of the point that was made about the limits for people in this. How much you're willing to work for? How much is your intrinsic motivation worth to you? For some people, it's I actually really like working at this job for $200,000 a year, and I want to stay there. I don't have a problem. I don't feel that internal tension between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Right? I'm happy with my job. And again, it's really it's turning money into this leading indicator, right? Turning it into information. It's the same thing. It's money that becomes a reflection, this projection on the photon screen, the phosphorus screen or whatever it is. I don't know what I think it's. It's is it a wave? Is it a particle? What is the position? It's well, throw it at the screen and see what see how it scatters, right? And that's your answer. That is the answer. There is no answer other than throwing it at the screen and seeing where it scatters. So for you, for me, I was making, I took an 80% pay cut when I was working on GitTip full time, and so that was de facto, that's the answer to the equation. That's solving the equation for Chad of what's that worth to me. Solving the equation for Chad and his spouse changed the equation. I don't know. Am I answering your question?
You answered the question. The question becomes, in week 50, where you haven't made a contribution since week 30, but really, in week 1, you made this contribution that was really worth.
I see.
everything that you're getting.
So how do I get my
one.
sweat equity out of it?
How do you get your well, how do you get others to realize your sweat equity out
More conversation, yeah. You know, and what you can get away with, like we were saying earlier. You know, it's like I trust my own sense of what's right and fair by the team, and if somebody, you know, if I stray outside of that, and communication is going to be helpful, especially for larger dollar volumes like we might be talking about in a case like this. You know, I could have a conversation with the team and say, I'm interested in scaling back my, you know, my involvement over the next year. You know, but obviously I put a lot into this, and here's what I think would be fair for me to take out, even though I'm doing less work. And we have that conversation, record it publicly, so that people coming in 6 months from now new can go read the history and yeah, I mean it's all that kind of free flow. We have the ladder of love: safety, consent, transparency, openness, and love. And they build on each other, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But ladders are things you're supposed to want to climb instead of like hierarchies. So safety is foundational. You have to feel emotionally and physically secure. Consent, you have to feel that you're an agent. You're not being acted upon without your will. Building on those, transparency, we define as sharing information. Right, this screenshot that we've had up, that's sharing information. Openness we define as sharing control, making decisions together and trusting each other with decisions. And these are all building, like you can't have one without the prior levels, right? And then the top for us is love, which we define as freely serving one another. This gets back to the community of work, where we're all high trust, we're working together. And, you know, how can I help you? You know, like we're all working together on a thing, and we're all serving each other in the context of this community of work. And that's the top for us. That's the, you know, that's the telos, or the end that we're going for. That's the good for its own sake. We don't define something above that. But you need that, right? So you need each of those levels for this thing to work. You know, if somebody doesn't feel safe on your team, you know, like you're not talking about anything else but that person's safety. You know, if somebody doesn't feel, you know, that their agency is being respected, you know, and that you're acting without their consent, then you're not talking about sharing information. You're not talking about any of these higher order things. You know, you've got to drop down, shift gears down, and say, you know, what did we do wrong? How did this get screwed up, and how do we fix it, right? But then when you have that foundation, then you can start talking about transparency, sharing information. Everybody has to have the information. Then you have the sharing of control through governance models, whatever it is, and open source, very free flowing. Maybe you get larger and you need more formal democratic systems and whatnot. But yeah, and then the purpose for us is love. How did I get there? Gosh, what would you say?
That's the answer I was
sent
looking
me
for.
off.
So I don't know how you got there, but
Ladder of love, baby.
yeah.
Let's climb it.
The other thing that I was thinking about as we were talking about, and this is where the ladder, the control running, the ladder comes in, is and there's not a percentage limit that people can take out as they go. So they could take out whatever they want. Then it's based, but like to me, it just seems like you know, if you ask for more than 10% of it, it's going to give you an error and says you can't do that.
So this is a great book called Governing the Commons by Eleanor Ostrom. You familiar with the tragedy of the commons? This idea that that there's this inescapable drive to destruction in the logic of the commons. This is the tragedy of the commons, right? That our short-term interest dictates that we allow our cows to graze as much as possible, right? Each person with access to the commons, which has the long-term effect of ruining the pasture. Our individual long-term interests would dictate that we limit how much resources we're taking, how much we let our cows graze. And in the tragedy of the commons is the largely theoretical suggestion that it's inescapable, right? That this tragedy of the commons is inevitable, that we're all driven by selfish interest, and that we're gonna, ruin the resource pool that we have in common. So tragedy in the commons was it Harlan, 1968, was the article. Ostrom, 1990, is basically the answer to the tragedy of the commons. She says, look, slow down, calm down. We have plenty of examples of commons that have thrived for centuries and that have not had external government control and that have not ruined their common resources. We've done this. So the question is not like, oh, there's a theoretical tragedy. My model dictates that everything's going to hell. She's like, okay, come on. Let's go to Japan, let's go to Switzerland, let's go to the Philippines, and let's study and talk to the people that have figured this out in eastern Spain with the irrigation systems, right? And so she does this. So she looks at all of these. She looks at successful and unsuccessful. It's actually a well-researched academic book. It's really solid. And so her point is, we figured this out. Doesn't have to be a tragedy of the commons. All right? So what sent me here is that one of her main points is that it has to be adapted to local conditions. There is no one size fits all. It's about your team. If your team decides together collectively that a 10% withdrawal over time or whatever is the right answer for your team, then that's the right answer for your team, right? So that within this broader take what you want scheme, there's tons of room for variation and implementation that does the emotional work, right, the political work of figuring out what's right for this specific group of people working on this specific task together in this specific community. Which is, hey, what does this bring us back to? More work! There's always work to do. There's more work to do. And we love work. And we love doing it with other people.
And then the other question I had was, can you take yourself off the GradaPay, off the team?
Yes, absolutely. You can remove yourself. Yeah. So you can remove yourself because you can set your own take. So if you want to set it to 0 and be done with the team, you can absolutely do
But you still appear on the public roster.
In our implementation, you wouldn't. If we had historical data, we probably would show that. That you were taking. And actually, we do plan to do that as an aid to due diligence. When somebody joins your team for the first time, you don't know them from anyone, right? And you want to have some way to know how to trust them, So showing past history. I mean, just like on a job form, like list your past 4 jobs and why you left, right? That kind of thing. We'll probably mix that in. How are we doing?
One more question is, where is GradaPay going?
Thank you. So we basically had this 3-year pilot where we threw a bunch of stuff at the wall and tried to see what would stick. Some stuff stuck, some stuff blew up in our faces, and then a year ago we rebooted. So we have a very limited product offering, and we don't offer the screenshot I was showing you with the distributions right now. So our work is proceeding in 4 phases. The phase we're in now is still cleaning up after the explosions, the Gradapocalypse. The next phase that we actually already started on is bringing back Take What You Want just for the GradaPay team itself. Right now, everybody's been working on GradaPay without pay for a year, which is not sustainable. So everybody's working truly volunteer. So we're going to bring it back at least for the GradaPay team itself so that we can start incentivizing people to work on it by making money available to them. After we get that squared away, the next piece, so we have the payments, the Facebook giving $10,000 into the Varnish team, then we have the payouts, the distribution, and the Varnish team distributing money to PHK and the contributors. Okay, so payments and payouts. So the next 2 are payments. We're going to focus on payments first and really try and make that solid. We're going to look at the user experience, the graphic design, the whole product design on the payment side is our next major focus after we get, because these are still kind of emergency measures, cleaning up mess. Payments is our big focus over the next year. Then after that, we're going to circle back around to payouts and productize it for others besides ourselves. That's our strategy anyway. I don't know. We'll see. If anybody beats us to it.
Well, I had one more question. Have you considered what happens if I'm Paul Graham and I come along and I say, Chad, this thing's pretty interesting. I've got $1 million.
Yeah, they didn't answer us at all. Y Combinator was like,
Our
but other
traditional investment is, VC-backed stock, equity, blah, 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 blah. We've been doing it for a million years. And all of a sudden you go, you know what, if you structure a company this way, you no longer need a concept of ownership, right? I mean, that's really where this goes.
This is really interesting and fun right now. I mean, so GratiPay is one of a handful of companies exploring this. LiberaPay is another one I mentioned, fork of GratiPay from last year. Another one is called Open Collective, which came out of, I shouldn't say came out of, Xavier Damien Demont. Xavier Demont, did I get your name right? I'm sorry, Javier. We were together in France as well, and he started Open Collective. He started Storify. He's the founder of Storify. So he's done the Silicon Valley playbook, and so he's he's on that side of that line of like taking the VC as $500,000 investment, and hiring a team and building the product out. LiberaPay is a fork of GratiPay, so it's more on this side. I have a quadrant. Boy, if I took the time, I could figure out what the quadrant was. But there's like a quadrant with Bounty Source is another one that is on this side of the traditional VC company structure line. Bounty Source and Open Collective, and then LiberaPay and GratiPay are on this other side where it's like exploring, really pushing the boundaries in terms of exploring what ownership means. I mean, DAO is way over here. Well, I guess it's way over here now, but sorry, that was an inside joke.
When you're saying you approached Y Combinator.
Oh, we just applied for one of the batches, but I mean, it's a mill. So
I guess what I'm saying is Paul's ego, can Paul set his ego aside long enough in order to consider that there's a possibility where I give you $1 million and I become 10% of whatever the draw is. You see what I mean? Where I'm essentially...
we're using Paul as a cartoon right now. We've spent a lot of time talking to venture capitalists and thinking about how that could work, and these are some of the ideas. Like, yes, could you deal somebody in, and it was just take what you want, return on investment.
Right.
It's really, we're in this weird, but another way to look at it, what is ownership? Because I want the person that's in there at a penny to be an owner. We're also having conversations with, there's this movement called platform cooperativism. Why does one person, or whatever it is, I guess now it's public, but why isn't Facebook owned by the people that use Facebook? Why isn't Facebook a cooperative owned by the billion people that use Facebook?
Because they're the product.
Okay.
Right. That would be that's like the typical answer.
So then why isn't why isn't Facebook a cooperative owned by the hundreds of thousands of millions of advertisers that use Facebook? Would be, yeah, sure, another way to think about it. So we're asking, the point is that that's the mouthful of a name that's given to that conversation is platform cooperativism, trying to think about ownership and governance as a crucial part of sharing money and structuring projects together. Yeah. So there's what's the TLDR on that? I mean, there's also another thing to make sure everyone here is aware of. There was a major report published last week by Nadia Egbal, who's been researching this for the past 9 months for the Ford Foundation on funding digital infrastructure. The title is Roads and Bridges, the unseen labor behind our digital infrastructure. She's saying open source software is like the roads and bridges of society, of today's society. And we haven't figured out how to fund it. We figured out how to fund roads and bridges. Digital infrastructure is different in crucial ways from physical infrastructure, and has created this this value gap, right? That there's obviously tons of value in OpenSSL, this core library that's the entire internet depends on, but there's one person working quarter time on it for $20,000 a year, right? Like this is not like how do you have all of civilization hinging on one part-time hobbyist? It's amazing. Like that's actually pretty BA that dude's holding up civilization. But maybe we want to figure out how to help support him a little bit. So people are working on that major report. Look for it. Roads and bridges.
Just to comment, because it's an odd twist on like how much depends on like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett. If they disappear tomorrow.
Yeah.
They
at least have organizations,
Right, but like it could cause a lot of problems if not to depend on them directly.
Okay.
So it's an interesting twist around like
Maybe if,
what is their source of power, right? And previously like source of power was maybe money or like I own this land.
okay.
Now source of power is also information, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the one or two people who
Attention.
understand
Yeah.
SSL.
Mm-hmm.
The power of
Sure. That's the
all
power
of
to.
it.
Yeah.
Just a comment.
Yeah.
Throughout this, you sort of transition from like a company like Semco to the open source
Sure,
projects.
sure.
Sort of, pirouetting between the two, but like there's like some core differences that we've all sort of gotten at with
Okay.
like the incentives and like,
Mhm.
and I think as you support the ideological or philosophical argument with this sort of like intrinsic motivation and we're all family and I can clean the toilets one day and like program the next day and we're, it's all a shared house sort of.
Okay.
I think no matter how cynical I get along that line of argument, you can keep bringing in this, well, we just need to work together, and like that is an answer. I think that line of thought goes through. Maybe just a suggestion or something to keep in mind at your actual speech is like, I didn't hear you acknowledge that as much. That like, you talk about money being sort of the system of distributing gratification and stuff like that. And that's like a really happy way of looking at it instead of an allocation of resources and this other sort of like reality. Right.
Wait. Which reality are you centering here, pal? Are you saying that I'm not grateful for the person that made this chair, and that I want to give money to them, and I'm grateful that I love money as a way to thank them for making the chair?
That's a great way of looking at it. That's
Thank
also
you.
a privileged way of looking at it. Right? You're not going to France on this story. It's like we're not.
But that's two different.
conversation here.
Okay, but the salary that I'm going to France on is people giving me money, okay? And it's a gift to me.
Sure.
I receive it as a gift. And what's the appropriate response to a gift? Generosity. So when I give money to Delta Airlines, I'm grateful to Delta Airlines and to the people on the plane that, for the miracle of flight, right? Like it's
I guess
gratitude and
you're not
generosity.
wrong. You're right, but there's just.
There's just this cynicism that's deep in my soul that just can't admit that.
And maybe that's what I'm saying though, is that like I think you're targeting some of my cynicism, which is a good thing. I like this conversation. I think this is hopeful at all sorts of levels, right? And we're talking about this being lack of ownership and possibly political concepts. And, it's not just a company. And that's great. This is addressing some real problems.
Okay.
But again, throughout the conversation, you started a company like Semco, and then you come to an open source community where like we're not dependent on this. It's nice to get $100 a week, but like your daughter needs more than that, et cetera. And so just maybe some kind of acknowledgement of like it's an experiment. And you said that in answer to a lot of these questions. You haven't really been able to test it at all levels.
I mean, I
who knows
was,
what you would do, but-
and yeah, I mean, Lord knows that I have privilege and safety nets that enabled me to live on $1,500 a month with 4 kids in the United States. I mean, we were on food stamps, and state medical, welfare insurance for the kids. Not when the medical thing I mentioned. I mean, so yes, safety nets are important, right? Like this is a little seed, okay? And it's not about revolution. It's not about activism. It's not about turning the world upside down and burning the system down. This is a little seed, and look, one of the most spiritual experiences I ever had was in the McDonald's on Smithfield. There was an article last month. This fella, Chris Arnaud, I think his name is, out of Brooklyn, he's a photographer. And his article was about how McDonald's is a de facto community center for tons of low-income communities, right? Because McDonald's has really lenient policies around being able to hang out there, right? It's like you can go in and pay 88 cents for some fries and hang out and no one's going to hassle you, right? For the most part.
Free Wi-Fi.
And you get free Wi-Fi, right? And you get a bathroom and whatever else, right? And I had an experience at McDonald's on Smithfield where it was just like glowing, beaming community. It was that community, and it's like, God damn it! If humans can do this in a McDonald's, like why isn't this just like warp and woof? Why isn't this like the whole tenor of society, right? Like why do I go back to the 35th floor of the U.S. Steel Tower and not experience that, right? So this is more about, I don't know. I feel like I'm gonna go back and watch this and be like, gosh, he told me something really important and I totally flubbed hearing it. But I guess that's what it's recorded for.
Yeah, I think you're fine. It's just the answer is always this sort of conversation, trust. Your ladder, right? I mean that's the solution to every problem that my cynicism is supposed to bring up.
Okay. But it's by nature inclusive. It's by nature diverse, right? Like it's
sewer system. So it's like at some point, it has to become this larger system. That's not in order for this to work. Like you said, 5 years. Are we all going to raise our hands? Well, are they going to also? That's.
I mean, yeah. I talked a lot with my buddy that owns the landscaping company that I worked for last year. I'm like, I want a landscaping company run like this. He's like, yeah, we actually have a bet. I think he's gonna kiss my feet if in 10 years, like I can show him a landscaping or anything where in his word, laborers are operating on this principle, right? Or operating on these kind of principles. Like I should have just taken to Brazil and show him Semco. I think, but that's like Semco and Morningstar. It's like Morningstar's tomato processing. Like it's not privileged, open sourcers, right? This is like manufacturing companies, blue collar jobs. Normal people, right? Like it's, I don't know.
I actually worked for a landscape company 10 years ago and split it 60-40 cash. How is that different?
Yeah.
It was like guy was willing to do it. I thought, wow, this is good money. Like you said, great tan.
Yeah, right.
Better muscle tone than I ever saw.
God, my elbow's still kind of sore. Yes.
There's a lot to be said.
Well, that's good. I mean, isn't it? Yeah, it's good to have that balance, I think.
So, like, the stuff you brought up was what's been on the back of my mind the whole talk since the first time you brought up that gratitude stuff. And here's what comes to my mind.
Yeah.
Mind simple. When you have gratitude, so the nature of the world today is that there are more things you rely on than you can possibly keep track of.
Sure.
And every time you look at something and you delta Everest.
This Milton Friedman's pencil essay, was the other one? It's like you can't imagine, yes, the complexity of the modern world, the supply chains for the simplest thing.
Right, and then if you look at, say, delta Everest and say, I'm grateful for them, you do that for everything you do.
Yeah.
One of two things, in my mind, is going to happen. Either you're going to leave out a bunch of people because your mind can't handle it.
Okay.
Or you're going to use up all the energy that would fuel other things.
Okay.
Because you're just going to be like, oh, I'm happy about this, or I'm happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming, of course, that gratitude is a finite resource. It may not be. Once you have that, now the question is, if everybody did this,
okay,
would we even be able to have a civilization? Because everyone would be using their energy on being grateful for what they have. Would people be able to specialize, compartment, throw out that part and use all that energy for something else?
I would say that's pretty close to exactly the description of what I'm testing with GratiPay, is can we actually have a civilization built on gratitude? So I don't know yet. Let's talk in 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years. See how far we get. Worst things to attempt, I think. Should we leave it there?
That's a good closer.
I'll take the challenge. Anybody else wants to take it with me? Python and JavaScript and HTML and CSS and SQL.
I knew I could count.
Yes. Oh, it's a
I
Postgres. It's a
was ready.
Postgres app.
I was ready.
Yes.
You know,
Just